Hello, and welcome to Beer and Conversation with Pigweed and Crowhill. Good evening, Pigweed.
Good evening, Crowhill.
What's on your mind today?
Well, the invasion of Ukraine. Have you heard about it?
Well, that was months ago. What are you talking about?
Exactly. It was in February.
February.
And yes, so that's many, many months ago. And I was just like, well, I don't want to do a show now because this is so fast moving. By the time the show comes out, the conversation could be irrelevant. And
well, that was the expectation. The expectation was that Russia would take over like this.
Well, yes. I mean, didn't the head of the Joint Chiefs of Staff said this would be a 48-hour operation?
Right, yeah.
Good job there, guys.
Right.
And so I keep being 1 week away from going, we need to do a show on this, but something's about to break. Well, I don't know. Nothing's really breaking.
Okay, well, it's been quite a while, so I guess we need to do a retrospective on this. Yeah.
Yes, it's more. Yes, exactly. It's not a breaking news story.
No.
It's more of a retrospective. And where are we now?
How did we get here? Why are we here? All that kind of stuff.
Okie dokie.
Okay,
well, let me get into here.
Yeah, all right.
Good
so this
golly.
is Hi-Wire Brewing.
Okay.
Which is in Asheville, North Carolina. We've done one or two of their beers before.
Yeah. And
this one is an Imperial India Pale Ale.
When I hear Imperial, I think dangerous thoughts.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. This is Double High-Pitch IPA.
Yeah.
It's a 9%er,
God.
which is that's a little tough.
Oh.
And this is an extra large version of their flagship IPA.
Yeah.
And has classic West Coast hops and has dank and citrusy aromas.
I tell you what, that word dank is kind of hard to figure out. Smell that and tell me if that isn't the right word.
Yeah, that's the right word.
I know.
Yeah,
I'm not sure exactly what that means, but when I think of dank,
that's it.
That's what I think of.
That's it. Yeah, I think dank is one of those words that you only really learn to appreciate after you start trying various high hop beers.
Right, and so outside of the beer world, dank is like a basement that doesn't get enough. Air. It's like just a little bit. It's a little bit wet, but it's not too moldy.
Yeah,
but
little. Yeah, exactly. It's sort of a bad basement smell, but not like sewery basement smell. Just sort of wet basement smell. And when you combine that with hops, it's really not.
It's not a bad descriptor for this.
No.
And I don't mean it in a bad way.
No.
At all.
No. So
although there is a hop that I've heard. I've heard other beer describing terms. One is horse blanket.
Oh, lovely.
Yeah, and it's got that really good it's kind of like a cat piss smell.
Oh yeah, I know. Every once in a while they use these weird words. Like what?
Right, but
are you trying to get me to not to like this?
But you don't mean that in a bad way. I'm not sure how you don't mean that in a bad way.
Yeah. Smells a little bit like a foot.
But in a good way. Yeah. Sure.
Really? How does that work? How does that work? It's kind of like when you read descriptions of wines, and they throw in all these crazy things, and you're like, really? Really?
Yeah, it's like a mushroom and tobacco. Okay.
Many years ago, I was writing this story that had this particular tobacco in it.
Right.
And I took I had some of that tobacco, and I wanted to get some fresh perspective on what this smelled like. And I took it to, this was when one of the Crowhill clan was maybe 12,
okay,
and her friend, and asked them to smell.
Yeah, so that's a palate. A nose that has no other information.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
So I said, okay, I want you to close your eyes. I want you to smell something and tell me what it smells like. And, let them smell this tobacco. And the answers that they gave is like, well, it kind of smells like prunes and raisins. I was like, what?
What?
because I had just read a review that had those same kind of words in it. I was amazed.
Funny.
Yeah.
That's very
so
good.
some of those things actually really work.
Okay. Yes, it's
Ukraine.
It's not February 24th.
No.
It's much later, and kind of a stalemate-y kind of a situation. There's a little bit of movement here and there. There's no longer, the press doesn't have a lot of appetite for...
No, we're not getting it every day.
Right,
no.
So it wasn't all day, every day.
It was for a while.
Zelensky, yes, at the beginning, right. Zelensky is the new Churchill / George Washington.
Right.
All day, every day.
How evil Putin is, and yeah.
Right. All right, so now it's time to kick back with a little perspective on what's going on here, and I was listening to this podcast where the guy was the professor was referring to some military higher up guy, right?
Yeah.
Who's saying, I don't know if it was Taliban or some whatever the situation was. They're like, all right, let's try to figure out what they think. He's like, I don't give a damn what they're thinking. All
Well,
right, wait a minute
better,
now.
yeah.
Yeah, maybe
Yeah.
a better approach is,
Yes.
right? Oh, just killing. We just got to stop them and stop them hard.
Yeah.
Well, maybe they're not insane.
Yeah.
And they haven't with their insanity, convinced all of their people that they're doing the right thing. They might have, not that you have to agree with their perspective, but let's at least see what they're thinking.
Yeah, that's a sure sign that you've gone down a bad path when you think that the other side is only motivated by evil, or they're only motivated by insanity, or no. These are people who have a perspective.
Yeah.
And if you don't understand that perspective, then you're the one who's missing
Your
out
chances
here.
of properly addressing this
Yes, are
are
bad.
not very good.
Yeah.
So I think let's just assume that he's not an evil madman who has no idea what he's doing. And what is Putin thinking? Is that how you want to start? Let me back it up. About 1,000 years. The Rus people, before there was a Russia, comes from the Rus word, which is the beginnings of what became Russia. Actually began, which was called Kievan Rus, and that Kiev, is that what we're doing now?
Apparently
I've been
Kiev is the
doing
Russian
Kiev
pronunciation.
my entire life. It's been Kiev,
Right, but
isn't there
Kiev
Kiev
is
and chicken Kiev.
My understanding is the Kievan pronunciation is Russian and the Kiev pronunciation is Ukrainian.
So if you want to be properly
Ukrainian,
Ukrainian,
then you have to say
use
Kiev.
you have to change your art. All right, well, let's just get on the. You want to do Kiev?
Well,
So,
did we ask what their pronouns are?
We didn't even ask them the pronunciation
I
of
know.
their own city.
Yeah, okay.
The Kievan Rus, that was their end. That Kiev. What is we doing?
I don't care. We're Kiev.
Okay, was the political and cultural center of Eastern Europe before there even was a Russia.
Mm-hmm.
So Russia has, they're not invading some country that they've, some far off land.
Yeah.
This is basically culturally a part of.
Yeah, Ukraine is very closely culturally connected to Russia, not just politically, culturally, and religiously. There are a lot of strong ties between Russia and Ukraine.
All right. So there's this. Came across this 4-pointer on what the possible motivations or views of what the heck is going on here. How and why we got to this point, or how and why Putin made this calculation.
Right.
Right. It wasn't a feverish fit that he made this calculation.
It was a very interesting discussion by Jordan Peterson on trying to explain what's going on. Why would Putin do this kind of thing? And he came up with 4 explanations. The first explanation is the one that we hear most frequently, which is that Putin is an evil expansionist thug who wants to revive the old Soviet Union.
Right. And until very recently, everybody's been doing their best to expand their territory, from Ivan the Terrible to Peter the Great to obviously the Soviets, who took over all of Eastern Europe.
Right.
That has been the operation of Russia, and it's sort of. He's not a crazy outlier. This would just simply be consistent with Russian behavior since the beginning of Russia.
Well, not just Russian behavior, but everybody.
Yeah.
The weird thing.
You press the advantage where you can.
Yeah. The thing that's a little weird to me when I look at history is what countries used to do and kind of expected as normal for thousands of years, which was we take over, we have an opportunity, we take this land. And you have an opportunity, you take that land. That's just the way it
Basically,
was.
every border is the result of
A war.
the inability for the other guy to take over, to one guy to take over the other guy. It's like,
Exactly.
all right, this is just getting too costly here. How about if we draw the line here? Does everybody agree?
Yeah.
And there you get a border.
Right. And what this idea of rule by conquest was the generally expected
Yeah.
the way things worked for thousands of years, but relatively recently,
Yes.
in like the past, like, I don't know, 5-6 decades.
Yeah.
We've
Since World War II, we decided, all right, wherever the lines are, wherever the lines are drawn now, that's where they need to stay forever. And
Yeah.
if any encroachment, is unheard of, it's unprecedented.
And I'm not in any way trying to justify or promote the idea of, taking over territory just because you can. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying it's interesting to note that that's a very recent development. That's a very recent attitude that
Right.
people didn't used to think that way.
Yeah, that's nuts.
Yeah.
So the suggestion here on point one is that he's not some crazy guy doing something that's never been done before. He's just following along in the tradition of authoritarian Russians.
Right. Saying,
pressing their advantage when they can.
I'm going to take my advantage when I can. I'm going to take what I can and try to stop me.
Yeah, and in a patriot, what kind of popularity? Now, does he have it? When you control the elections and you control the media, it's really hard to get a gauge.
Yeah, how do you know if you're really popular or not?
But
Right.
I mean, do you think that he's just being a patriotic Russian and people on the ground now? Because in the West, we're going to promote any peace march, right? Anti-Putin activity. It's really hard to gauge.
Yeah.
What kind of
how popular
support?
How popular is he really?
Yeah.
I don't know.
I don't know.
That's a good question. So that was explanation one, is that
Right.
he's the thug. Explanation two is kind of follows this guy named Mearsheimer. Is that it? John Mearsheimer. Sorry, John Mearsheimer.
Yeah.
Which is that the West has been provoking Russia and Putin by inviting all of Russia's border states into NATO and the EU. That
It's funny now. This isn't an op-ed that was written since February 24th.
No, it was written like 7 years ago.
Yes, so this is a lecture from this guy 7 years ago when nobody even could find Ukraine. He's going, guys, you might not want to poke this bear.
And it's analogous to the Monroe Doctrine, where the United States says, North and South America, that's our domain. Don't you mess with it.
That's pretty ballsy.
Don't, like, what would we do if China started, like, taking over Mexico?
Yeah.
Or
Right, Mexico just starts drifting over, a little bit more aligned, and then the rest of the world goes, hey, that's a free country. They can choose who they want to be with, just like Ukraine can choose.
Yeah.
Yeah, what are we going to do?
We would not put up
by
with that.
and
right.
go, well,
So
probably not.
so Mearsheimer's point is that Russia wants some sort of a buffer between themselves and the West, because obviously the Soviet Union and the West have been at odds for quite a long time, since after World War II, and they want some security. They want some level of security, and if we're pushing ourselves closer and closer to them, they're going to feel threatened.
Well, let's talk about what happened to this buffer zone.
Right,
So
exactly.
the Iron Curtain fell on Eastern Europe, which they probably always considered to be more theirs than Europe. I mean, not Poland. Poland's always been very independent, but I think
it wasn't. I mean, remember Solidarity and Lech
Well,
Walesa and all that kind of stuff. That was them throwing off communist rule.
Yeah. No, but I mean, like tradition, like pre-communist.
Okay.
I don't think that they felt themselves as really part of the Russian sphere in the way that Georgia and
But if you look at a map, if you look at like East Germany and east of there, all of that was the Soviet Union.
It was the Soviet Union. So imagine. So here you are. You're the Soviet Union. There is no Soviet Union, and you're just back to Russia, and each of these countries gains its own independence. Okay, but you guys got a long history together. We're going to maintain our ties and our yeah. I mean, you're still basically in the Russian sphere,
Right?
Even though not in the same way was during the Soviet Union. Then so the European Union comes along in 1993, and that's just Western Europe as we think of Western Europe. But little by little, all
the border states: Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Poland, the Czech Republic, Slovakia, Hungary. All these countries are joining the European Union, which used to be part of the Soviet Union. Not all of them.
Yeah.
Not like Serbia wasn't part of the Soviet Union ever, but you have all these countries that used to be part of the Soviet Union that now have aligned themselves with the West, and they're right on the border with Russia.
Right, and one thing is for them to be, like I said, no longer under the yoke, however more aligned with. Now you're in the European Union.
Yeah.
So you don't think that that's unpleasant for all the stands, the Asian southern part, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, whatever stands,
Kazakhstan, or all the stands, yeah,
all those stands that have some delicious natural resources. Now they're independent. You have to recognize in the geopolitical world that Russia's feeling kind of small. How do you want to humiliate this? It's still the biggest country in the world. It's still the most dangerous nuclear power. It still has the largest army probably outside of China. It's not some backwater dope that you can just humiliate. I don't think.
Yeah. So I want to make sure to clarify that we are in no way trying to justify marching tanks in and killing people. We're not against
bombing civilians.
Yeah, we're not in favor of that. We're just what we're trying to do.
What is Putin thinking?
Exactly. We're trying to evaluate what are people thinking on a larger geopolitical scale than just, isn't it terrible?
And what do we in the West have to consider when we are cozying up to these ex-Soviet satellites?
Right. So here we have this situation where the West is in a very serious way provoking Russia by moving further and further into their territory.
Right. So, like you said, so these 12, 13 countries that are now moving into the European Union. Ukraine is big.
Yes.
It's the biggest one of all of them. It shares this massive border and shares a long, 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 long history with Russia. To start courting them, so you had before Zelensky, there was the other pro-West guy.
Yeah.
And before that was the pro-Russian guy.
Yes.
This is all within the 21st century.
Yeah.
Right? So this is in the early 2000s.
Right.
That you had a guy, you had the pro-Russian government, lots of Russian speakers, and firmly connected.
Well, that's another thing to know about Ukraine. Ukraine is not homogenous. You have portions of Ukraine that speak Russian and portions of Ukraine that speak Ukrainian. I think that's the right name of the language. And you have, different sentiments within Ukraine about Russia.
I met a guy a few years ago who I don't know if his girlfriend, she might have been a mail-order bride for all I know, but had a Ukrainian girlfriend.
Mm-hmm.
And talking to her, asked her, she speaks both Ukrainian and Russian. She's from the Ukraine, but her dad only speaks Russian.
Okay.
And this is before I knew anything about it. And ever since then, I was like, wow, you can go your entire life, have a job, do everything that you need to do, purely in Russian. Tells me something.
Well, a lot of these countries, people speak Russian as well as whatever other language.
Right. That's what I'm saying is, right, what you would expect as being part of the Soviet Union, because they're probably obligatory.
Yeah.
But to only speak Russian, that says something even more.
Yeah.
While in another country.
Yes.
So that just tells me the deep roots or the deep cultural connection.
Yes.
In large parts of Ukraine.
There is a strong connection between Ukraine and Russia. So we have number one, Putin's an evil expansionist. Number two, the West is provoking Putin.
Right.
Number three, is Russia. Now, these four explanations are what might Putin be thinking. Number three is Russia is concerned about the stability of their petrochemical-based economy.
Yeah.
So
They
Russia,
don't really. I mean, how many things do you pick up that say "Made in China" on the back? Lots.
Yeah.
How many things say "Made in Russia"?
Yeah, not a lot.
Yeah. So they're they're almost like the Middle East in terms of they just dig their money out of the ground.
Their economy is very strongly based on their ability to sell oil and natural gas, and when you sell oil
And they've
and
already
natural
lost
gas,
the stands.
Yeah.
They're never lost. Well, there's probably not that much oil and stuff in Eastern Europe,
but when
However,
you sell
think
oil
about
and
it.
natural gas, it goes by pipeline. It doesn't
especially for a gigantic country that has almost no ports.
Yeah. It doesn't like magically fly from Russia to Germany. So it has to go by pipeline from Russia through these other countries, which are now becoming
Increasingly aligned
aligned with the West.
Yeah.
So that is a threat to their economic stability because they're trying their whole economy is based on exporting all this oil and gas.
Right.
And their pipelines are going through Poland, other countries that are not.
And
very
now they're
friendly
right,
with
and,
them.
and now Putin's going, and Ukraine too.
Yeah,
Wait a minute.
right.
Wait a minute.
Hmm.
Right.
So that is another reason to another possible explanation of what Putin is thinking in terms of why is this too much? Number 4, and this one is
It's tenuous. Go
it's
ahead.
tenuous, but it's interesting, and the explanation is that Russia is more serious about Christendom than the West is.
Right. The ex-atheist country.
Right. Is now more Christian than the supposedly Christian West.
Or more concerned with moral degradation.
Yes. So here's a possible explanation that Russia sees the West as hopelessly decadent and anti-Christian, and that Putin invaded Ukraine to rescue it from the decadent West.
Rather than have the decadent West on their doorstep by Ukraine joining the EU or NATO, he's like, I will destroy. This is it's like what's the Vietnam? We destroyed the village to save it.
Right.
Like, I will wreck this country.
Right.
Before I will allow it to be ruined by Western decadence.
I would rather see it a smoldering ruin than allow it to become. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's a weird attitude, but this also would go to explain why the Russian Orthodox Church seems to be supporting Putin in his invasion of Ukraine.
Okay.
So, the Russian Orthodox Church, you would think, would be like in favor of peace, and,
Yeah.
but apparently they're supporting him.
I
in
did not
this.
know that.
And this idea of sort of saving Ukraine from the decadent West.
Right.
And now we say the decadent West. What does that mean? Okay.
He goes back and plucks from Russian literature
Mm-hmm.
in Dostoevsky and others this 19th century concern, Nietzschean concern about the death of God and the loss of religion and what it's going to leave in its wake.
Right.
Right. So, and he's like, so what does this actually have to do? Right. So he steps backwards. Like, well, what does that have to do with Putin now? Well, that's it. What is going to fill this void, and what he's seeing is transing of children and the inability to explain what a woman is.
Right. The West. I mean,
He's
anybody.
like, what the F?
Anybody who is in the even smallest amount fair and logical about this has to agree that the West has just gone nuts. Like we can't even say that a man is a man and a woman is a woman. We're allowing 12-year-old girls to get their breasts chopped off because they think they're boys.
They can't choose to get their ears pierced at the mall.
Right.
But with the help of some perverts everywhere, from doctors, teachers, counselors, everybody else,
Yeah.
you can chop your tits off.
Right. The idea that the West has gone insane is, to me,
the evidence is Putin's got to be going. I don't know if he has a TikTok account, but
if you don't see that the West has gone insane, you really need to spend some time, like, go off to the woods and think for a couple of days. The West is absolutely insane right now, and
yes.
So Russia, it's possible. I'm not endorsing any of these explanations. I'm just saying, if we're trying to understand why is Putin doing these things, one possible explanation is that he sees the West as a corrupting, ridiculous influence.
I'm guessing it's right. It's some slice of all of these, and who knows in what proportions. Only Putin could tell us.
Right.
And probably a little bit of narcissistic ego going down in the history books. Well, that's probably goes under number one. Yeah.
But how did we get drawn into all this kind of stuff? Why did we care about Ukraine ever?
Yeah. What was this? What was this remark here?
So Russia threatened by careless provocation Western expressionism into a country we really don't care about, except when our unearned moral virtue is challenged.
That's a great phrase, our unearned moral virtue.
Yes.
So now we're all up on our high horse.
Wasn't Ukraine one of these countries? Wasn't there like some weird thing with Hunter Biden?
Yes, wasn't understood at the time of the Hunter Biden thing that it really was the most corrupt country in Eastern Europe, and then it became the paragon of virtue when they got invaded.
Are they even a democracy? Like, we talk about them like we're supporting democracy again. Is Ukraine a democracy? I don't think so.
No, it's an oligarchy, just like Russia, where there's a handful of super powerful, wealthy businessmen who kind of run the country. Now, my understanding recently, Zelensky, to his credit, sort of had to purge many of his top people because of their corruption. So people who are willing to sell out their own country to Russia for some financial gain. Like, all right, look, after we take over, you're going to be sitting sweet. Like, all right, I'm on your side, and you're like a national security advisor or something.
And I don't care what country you're giving up in that situation. You should be shot. Like one natural virtue is you support your own country. That's just the way it goes. And so those guys they're disgusting. But Ukraine is, like, who cares about Ukraine, first of all? It's not a democracy, and it's corrupt. How do we come to think that this was...
how about just this modern idea of sovereignty? It's like, we have sovereign nations who are making their own decisions, and when one country decides it's going to take another country, that's bad. But is it the United States' job to be the one that steps in? First of all, isn't this Europe's problem?
Yes. So generally speaking, I agree that we should end the whole concept of rule by conquest.
If Venezuela tried to move into Costa Rica...
would we do anything?
Right. Well, I mean...
look at Africa. It happens all the time in Africa.
But at least that's our hemisphere.
Yes.
So, yes, we probably would, knowing... Actually, especially because we know that it really wouldn't take that much muscle to push Venezuela out of Costa Rica.
Yeah.
But is this where we want to go in? And what would be the consequence? Let's just so if we throw up our hands, then Belarus is already on board. Let's keep in mind that Russia has recently moved into
Georgia and into the
they went to Crimea. They said, all right, this whole Crimea thing. They're like, I don't even know how this happened. Crimea's always been part of Russia. So 2014, they said, by the way, Crimea is part of Russia. And everybody's like, okay. Which is funny because it's really not attached to Russia. It's really hanging off the bottom of Ukraine. It's a little peninsula over there. Anyway, they said that was theirs. They went in again on the Russian portion of Georgia is being oppressed. So we're going to go in and take a couple of provinces out of Georgia. Now, let me make this point, and probably doesn't go anywhere. but I've always found it interesting, and I don't know what to make of it, is that Stalin was from Georgia. He was not Russian. So Stalin wasn't Russian, Hitler wasn't German, and Napoleon wasn't French.
Ah.
I don't know if there's anything to. I don't know where to go from there. But I've just always found those three things. I don't know. We're thinking about them. Does it mean anything? Do you have a greater appreciation or a greater sense of
what about Mao?
nationalism?
Mao was Chinese. I
don't think we can put
Chinese.
that on Mao. Anyway, so the idea that Russia would think that Georgia is part of Russia, Stalin, anyone?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that kind of does make sense.
So there are a lot of reasons to doubt the prevailing, mainstream news media explanation of what's going on in Ukraine. I guess that's kind of the bottom line, is that we're not endorsing any of these other explanations, but there's more going on than just bad boy Putin is invading poor innocent Ukraine.
And the execution of the war, even if you were a total apologist, you'd still have to say it's horrifying and reprehensible the way that they have targeted civilian areas. I mean, it's like, wait a minute, I thought you were going to steamroll in here, and it's very unimpressive. Just like it's like basically World War II ordnance. Can't you focus on the actual troops? No, we just let the bullets fly everywhere and see what we can do.
It does seem to make, like, we used to think that Russia was a very serious power. It makes us think maybe Russia isn't so tough after all.
No, I remember talking to a guy in a bar who was in intelligence. This was after the fall. They're like, they started finding out more and more, like, we totally overestimated what the military threat they are. Now that it's a little bit more open.
We seem to do that. Didn't we do that with Iraq?
The fifth largest country.
What was the Guard, the Imperial Guard?
Oh gosh, we don't want to do it.
We don't want to mess with those guys.
Yeah, those guys came running out of their foxholes begging for food because they were starving to death.
Right.
Yes, horrifying, unacceptable prosecution of this war.
And despite everything we said, Zelensky is a badass, and
Yeah, I kind of like the green shirt all the time. And
right.
although maybe before Congress he could have put a suit on, but
exactly.
Anyway,
right.
But so in the beginning we kind of talked about the lack of historical perspective. This idea that war in Europe is horrifying. That's only for like 70 years, and for the previous 1,500 years since the fall of the Roman Empire, it's been nothing but war.
Nothing but war in Europe.
Yes, so yes, because it's happening in our lifetime, and we're used to peace in Europe. If you've ever cracked a history book, you'd know that this is the default state of Europe.
Yeah. There's another thing about Russia that we haven't touched on, and that is that Russia has experienced being invaded in a way that we have a hard time understanding.
Yes.
Like, so Napoleon invaded Russia, Hitler invaded Russia, and millions of people died.
With devastating numbers.
Yeah. So, and when Napoleon invaded, at least
this is about 1812, 1814?
Yeah. At least 600,000 Russians died, probably more. When Hitler invaded Russia...
More or less?
27 million.
See, that's nuts.
So, yeah. And
you don't think that's fresh in your mind? I mean, it's 1 generation ago.
Exactly. So this is from Russia's perspective, the idea of we're going to allow the West to keep encroaching on our borders, that's got to horrify them.
I think we're looking at this map here where they've lost everything from Estonia down to Albania. I think they're thinking to themselves, all right, we've put up with enough. This is a step.
This is scary.
Ukraine is
a step too far.
A step too far.
Yeah. So then the other thing to consider is that there's been this historic tension between Eastern and Western Europe over the Western and Eastern churches, the Roman Catholic Church versus the Orthodox Church. So not only is there a political line in Europe, there's a religious line in Europe. You have Roman Catholics on one side of it and Eastern Orthodox on another. So there are all kinds of reasons why the East and the West have mutual misunderstanding and mutual distrust.
Now, all right. Well, good. Do you have like a couple sentences to explain? So this is Constantinople. At this point, it's all one church.
Yeah.
Right.
So in the 11th century,
Okay.
the east and the west,
The schism?
split, the Great Schism, right? And it was over a weird thing. It's called the Filioque. It's a line in the Nicene Creed about whether the Holy Spirit proceeds from the Father or from the Father and the Son. Okay, but we're not going to get into that.
Right,
So anyway, the Roman Catholic Church asserted their jurisdiction and said that they could change this, and the Orthodox Church said, no, you can't, and there was this big schism. And that's lasted for 1,000 years. And
Right. It's very Catholic, just without without acknowledging the authority of the Pope. Is that about it? Or more
yes.
than that?
I mean, there's more to it than that.
Right.
There's also, if you talk to Orthodox Christians, they have different perspectives on certain things. For example, in the West, you have statues, and in the East, you only have icons. There's a difference in the way they do art. There's also a difference in the way they pray, and there's a difference in sort of their attitude towards spirituality. And so there's a lot of differences between the West and the East.
And so, all right, so Poland's Catholic.
Yeah.
So this goes from Greece up through what, Romania?
Yeah, so
Bulgaria, Ukraine.
So the Ukrainians are Orthodox.
Yeah.
So you have a line that goes up through Europe, roughly kind of through what was Serbia used to be part of?
Yugoslavia.
Yugoslavia, right? So the Yugoslavian countries and up through like sort of to the right of Poland and up through that way. Everything to the east of that was Orthodox, and everything to the west was Roman Catholic. So there's also this traditional antipathy going on there. So the idea of Ukraine, which is an Orthodox country, being aligned with the West is also another. Add to all the other four things we've talked about.
There's another.
There's
aspect.
another one. Right.
Okay, so, yes, this is going very poorly, very unimpressive. You have desertion, you have high casualty rates, but
and a lot of the Russian soldiers.
And there's not a lot of public pressure. It's not like right. There's not. I mean, there's some, but there's not like kind of public pressure that's going to drive him out. Like there's so much press that's against it because the press is controlled. He's not going to go, you know what? Sorry, you know what, guys? That was a really bad idea. And so we're just going to apologize and pull out and pretend like it never happened. Is that likely to happen?
No. I think what's going to happen is there's going to be a division in Ukraine.
Sort of like the Georgia situation, right? Yeah. Where he just sort of peeled off the pro-Russian parts.
Yeah.
Or just, they didn't become part of Russia. They became independent republics or something.
Right. So I think probably what's going to happen.
You have to offer. You have to give him the off ramp, don't you? I mean, at some point.
Yeah. So I think the Russian-speaking, pro-Russian portions of Ukraine are probably going to become part of Russia, or become a separate country.
Right. Autonomous region.
Right. Yeah.
Which is
Right. And that the rest of Ukraine will continue on its way. But I'm not even sure even that's.
But with the assurance that there's no EU, no NATO, and give me these regions and we'll call it a day.
Right.
I'm saying something like that.
Yeah, something along those lines. Because I'm not sure Russia can accept even the western part of Ukraine, which is Ukrainian-speaking and not as pro-Russian. I don't think they can accept even them becoming part of NATO or part of the EU. So there's got to be some other kind of a settlement here.
Okay, well, so it took us a while to get to it because it's hard to see what's going on, but it's not over.
It's not as simple as the news wants to make you think it is.
Right. You got the good guys and the bad guys, and Russia's a mean old thug. Right. He's doing this just for no reason at all.
And if we came across as apologizing for Putin, we're not.
No,
I mean, this is horrible and awful, and we hate it.
We're just trying to get into the man's mind a little bit, trying to peer into his soul, like
there we go.
George Bush.
Like George Bush when he looked in his eyes and said, "I could see into his soul." Yeah.
Now the news outlet of record, the Babylon Bee,
Yes,
has a few things to say about the.
Oh my goodness!
Yes.
President Zelensky insulted by Biden's offer of only $33 billion in weapons when he gave the Taliban $86 billion.
Yes, and here we have a report here. This is just breaking news. Everyone who adds the Ukrainian flag to their profile pic to receive a Nobel Peace Prize.
Of course,
because
that's what matters.
Look how much you have done to advance world peace.
Exactly.
By tagging your profile.
I know. If you change your profile picture to say the right thing, then you are, gosh, you've done all that needs to be done.
Yes. All right. Well, that'll be our little addition to the show there. Thank you, Babylon Bee, and feel free to promote us anytime you want.
Exactly. And if you like Beer and Conversation with Pigweed and Crowhill, please tell a friend, invite them to listen, and
feel free to comment. And we will read your comment and comment on the comment.
There we go.
All right.
Okay. Cheers.
Cheers.